Hey, what's going on, gorgeous people? How the hell are you guys doing? Welcome back to the James Kennedy podcast. Apologies for the somewhat sporadic nature of when I'm dropping these episodes. At the moment, we are neck deep in album promo for the new James Kennedy and the Underdogs album Rebel, which is coming out in just 3 months' time, man. Man, I can't wait for you guys to finally hear this thing. It feels like it's been a long time coming, and we've been really enjoying playing the new tunes over the summer festivals and stuff like that, and they seem to have been going over pretty well as well, so that bodes well. But I want you guys to hear the proper recorded versions now, man. So if you haven't pre-ordered your copy on vinyl yet, it is available on limited edition vinyl signed by the band, hand-numbered, at jameskennedyofficial.com/rebel. Only a few left. They've been flying out, so grab them while they're hot. But I'm not going to waffle too much with the preamble this week because I want to get straight down to business with what I think is a really, really important episode of the podcast. I have been living and breathing the book by today's guest ahead of our conversation with him today, and I can say hand on heart that it has changed my life for the better, and I know that it will do the same for you too. So, being the generous all-round legends that we are over here, we're going to be giving you guys the one-on-one with the author of said book, and giving you guys some of the many pearls of wisdom and life-changing insights contained within a book called The Age Code by Dr. David Cox. If you want to know anything at all or get the truth about food and health and well-being and what's actually good for you and what's actually not, and how better to feed your body, feed your soul, feed your spirit, and feed your mind for a long, happy, healthy life, there is only one book you need to buy at this point, and it is this one. David leaves absolutely no stone unturned in this absolute beast of a book and lays out all of the latest science-backed information about what actually works and what doesn't. It's a fascinating and super interesting book that blew my mind and opened my eyes on every page. So as you can tell, I'm a fan, and I really, really hope that you listen to the whole of today's conversation because I really think you'll get some life-changing, tangible information out of this that you can apply in your daily life that will make your life longer, healthier, happier, and much more informed about what you're putting in your body. All I ask in return is that you take 1 second out of your life and you click follow, subscribe, or like, or hit the star button, or whichever thing you got to click on whichever platform you're listening to it on. Please, please, please just go and do that. I nag you guys every week. I see the analytics. I know how many downloads these things get. You freeloading so-and-sos. All you got to do is give me a star rating, man, and smash that 5 stars. Smash a 4-star. I don't care. Just smash something. Us so-called content providers live and die by that stuff. It costs you nothing. It takes no time. You just got to click it with your finger. So please go and do that. And I'll keep this good stuff coming. Right, lecture over. Let's get down to business and welcome onto the show neuroscientist and best-selling author Dr. David Cox, whose latest book, The Age Code, has only been out for a few months but is already an international bestseller and has been picking up nothing but amazing praise and acclaim everywhere it lands. And rightfully so, because I said the book is simply incredible. So David, we really appreciate you taking time out to be with us here today, mate. How you doing?
Good. Thanks so much, James. So looking forward to discussing all this with you.
Me too, man. I mean, I must confess straight out the gates that I'm doing this purely for selfish reasons, not for the audience's benefit, because I want to glean all this knowledge for myself.
We all want to live longer, right?
Surprisingly so, right? Well, I think we should probably explain from the outset that even though the book is called The Age Code, and of course it does deal with, living a longer, more fulfilling, happier, healthier life, but there's another factor that determines that, which is the biological age, which is not always the same as our actual chronological age. And it's that internal biological age that you focus on predominantly throughout the book. So would it be worth explaining to the listeners from the outset what the difference is between the two? What is the biological age? What are some of the factors that affect it positively or negatively? And what are most of us doing wrong on that front?
Definitely. Well, aging is so interesting. And, in the book, I sort of try and break it down into sort of these 2 different types of aging. You've kind of got what I call programmed aging, which is the aging you can't really control. Like, we all know there are certain things which happen to us at different time points in life. We all go through puberty. Women all go through the menopause, men go through the andropause, all of that. And we also know that there seem to be certain changes which happen in our late 70s, early 80s, which represent like another time point. But beyond that, it is very much a grey area, which is something which, we find really, really fascinating. And it's the reason why, we have some people, I think the super agers, as they're known, are some of the most interesting populations because everyone gets a little bit hung up on like the centenarians and the super centenarians. But super agers are people who get to like 85, 90, and they don't have any disease, which is really, really, really interesting because, a lot of people think, do you really want to live like sort of a long life if you're going to spend like sort of, many decades of that in poor health? But if you can be 95 and still living your best life, you don't have heart disease, you don't have anything impacting your ability to see friends and family, then that's pretty great. So those people are really, really interesting. And we've started to see, because over the past 10, 15 years, scientists for the very first time have developed these tests, like actually measuring different aspects of the aging process, from how well like of your organs are doing, how much stress they're under, how well your DNA is aging. And from that, we can really see there are quite big differences. If you look at, say, the average 40-year-old, you will get some who are perhaps many years biologically younger in different ways, while other people are many years biologically older. And, for me, like, so I think you saw this perhaps in a really big way during COVID, because we got people in their 80s and 90s who got COVID and they weren't really affected at all. They just had mild infection, felt a bit grotty for a few days. And then like the rest of us, bounced back pretty quickly. But then other people, even though they were decades younger, they were just affected by COVID just so much more strongly. Their immune systems weren't equipped to respond. They ended up being hospitalized. And that's an example of, what biological aging really is, these different variations. And being able to unpick that is really starting to yield a number of secrets which show us, what we shouldn't be doing and what we should.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, man. I mean, the book is very broad, very dense, but also, a very concise and easy to read book as well. I whizzed through it. I couldn't put it down. And there's no way we could cover everything in the book in this conversation today, and neither should we, because we want everybody to go and get their copy. But what are some of the main bad guys, the main processes that cause the worst of the damage and accelerate this internal biological aging? I mean, you mentioned tons of them in the book, things like inflammation, visceral fat, oxidization, free radicals. Would you say that those are amongst the main sort of processes that we need to understand and address if we're going to reverse the damage and change the rate at which most of us are aging a lot faster than we should be?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, so these are some of the big kind of like biological processes going on. Like, so within our bodies, they're completely invisible. We have no idea really that a lot of these things are kind of like playing out, but, they're kind of silently aging us over time. But I think what's quite interesting is some of the dietary habits which we're all doing and we all kind of just slip into, particularly sort of through middle age as life kind of gets busier and stuff like that, which are sort of silently enhancing kind of some of these things in the background. And I think one which is quite fascinating is actually just timing of meals. In the UK, and to be honest, like most of the Western world, most of us have dinner has always been the biggest meal. And in fact, if you look at aging science, it should be completely the other way around. Like humans, we've evolved to work with the sunlight. Really, we should be eating during the daylight hours. We should be getting the bulk of our calories across breakfast and lunch and having a small dinner. The reason because of that is if you're having a small dinner relatively early, it's not going to impact your sleep. And we know that sleep is so important for immune health and repair. And if you just look at the core of a lot of stuff relating to aging, it comes back down to this balance between damage and repair. And so many of us are kind of doing things which inflict more damage on our bodies without giving our bodies enough chance to repair. And because the body is actually quite incredible at repairing, at any one time, there are millions of like really sophisticated repair operations taking place within ourselves. And if we give our body like more chance for that to happen, then, over the long term, like the benefits can really be quite profound.
That's interesting, man. Why is it then? I mean, people talk about the Mediterranean diet as, the one that people should aim for. But when I travel to the Mediterranean, which I love to do, they're eating super late, man. I mean, like I go to Greece and they're not eating until 10 o'clock at night. Why is that?
I think, unfortunately, it's just simply how our world sort of evolved in the last 200 years, isn't it? I mean, I think in many ways, artificial light is to blame for that because, back in the days 200 years ago when we just had candles and oil lamps, most of us had to eat quite early because it was getting dark. Our sleeping patterns were completely different. And our world has totally changed in the last 150 to 200 years. And because of that, we've ended up working later, eating later. And I'll just tell you just one fascinating little nugget, which just really illuminated that for me. There's a massive nutrition study in France, which is really, really incredible. It follows about 200,000 people and tracks all of this information about their lives. They've followed these people for decades. And they were looking at what are some of the kind of behavioral habits which correlate to heart disease. And fascinatingly, the two which really, really stood out are, not skipping breakfast and having an early dinner. Those were the two biggest predictors of, whether you're going to be like sort of, protected from heart disease. And that's really, really fascinating because, if you look at some recent dietary changes, intermittent fasting has become like really, really, really popular. But a lot of people who intermittently fast, they skip breakfast. They don't start eating until midday. And intermittent fasting can be good, but if you're doing it earlier in the day, if you're doing it between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., that makes a much bigger difference. But hardly anyone does that.
You see, you're already dispelling some popular myths and dropping the truth bombs, which is why we appreciate you, sir. Because intermittent fasting is fashionable, and we live in the age of lots of noisy, conflicting information from very credible seeming influencers with millions of followers, all telling us to do different things and conflicting things, and it's impossible to know which way is up, what's the right thing and what's the wrong thing. So that's why your book is so important right now, because these, what we don't realize with these influencers online and stuff is that, one, they've got all the time in the world to spend 5 hours at the gym and drinking hundreds of pounds worth of expensive supplements every day, but also they get a lot of this stuff for free, and a lot of the stuff that they're pushing and a lot of the knowledge that they're pushing is basically come from their sponsors. So this book is a really important science-backed antidote to all that stuff, just to get some clarity. And so then, sticking on the theme of establishing what the bad guys are first before we talk about how we can make things better for ourselves. We've talked about processes. What about some of the ingrediential, I don't know if that's even a word, ingrediential bad guys, things like fructose, and obviously sugar is just the devil. What are some of the others?
Definitely. I mean, I think the interesting thing is a lot of us are simply eating too much too often, which is one of the biggest things. And I think the real reason, if you get to the core of why ultra processed foods are so, so damaging, is they're so addictive. No one eats just one cookie. And that's the whole problem at the end of the day. And they just make it so easy to just consume more energy than, we really need. So, when putting the book together, I wanted to try and live it. I didn't just want to kind of speak to scientists. I wanted to look at what am I doing? I wanted to walk the walk of longevity and aging science. And, I got a nutritionist to sort of map out the amount of calories I was consistently consuming on an average day right at the start of a book. And, I got my resting metabolic rates just really scientifically calculated. Now, this is the number of calories your body just really needs. And that's quite important to figure out because it varies so much depending on your height, your body type, your gender, your age. And for me, at that point in time, I basically should have been consuming about 2,100 calories a day. In fact, I was consistently getting 2,700 calories, which is good. So just that 600 more calories. And this is the interesting thing, because if you're just doing that, 1 or 2 days, that makes little difference. Your body can cope with that. But if you're doing that over a decade, that really adds up and correlates to consistent weight gain. And one of the things we've sort of realized is that, a lot of us has kind of assumed that, our metabolism, our ability to kind of process energy kind of slows down through midlife, which is why a lot of us gain weight, we get middle-aged spread, but that doesn't actually happen. It's more the fact that probably through ultra-processed foods, a lot of us are just consistently consuming too much, and then doing that over 20 years, takes its toll basically on the body. And I was doing that, I was eating twice as much sugar as I really should have been. And when people told me that, it all kind of made sense. And I had gained 10 kilograms between my university days and my mid 30s. And I had a lot of these scans done. I had too much visceral fat. So I think that's one of the big issues of ultra processed foods. They just simply make us, eat too much. And one of the interesting things is that if you're just constantly not giving your body lots of, any time, any breaks, your body's constantly in growth mode. And growth mode is really great when you're a child. You want to grow as quickly as possible. But when you're 35, you need to be consistently growing. You need those breaks. And it's those breaks when you're not eating, which is when your body is actually repairing. And just a lot of us are not doing that. So I think that's the core of why ultra processed foods are bad for us. With sugar, it's quite interesting because this actually comes down to a class of toxins which no one on the street has probably really heard of. They're called AGEs or ages, and they basically correlate to pretty much every single aspect of the aging process. So when you eat sort of a load of sweets, or even when you eat refined carbohydrates like white breads, because there's no fiber really in them, they hit your bloodstream really, really quickly. You get like a big overload of starch essentially into your blood. This actually causes caramelization. So in the book, I sort of liken it to when you see a chef making a creme brulee, you kind of get that caramel. That's actually happening in your blood. If you have a packet of Haribo, this is happening.
Oh,
And it's quite disgusting when you think about it. And the problem is, it basically takes proteins which are very, very good for you, like your collagen in your skin, and it kind of dries them out and stiffens them. It's why we get wrinkles basically over time. Is due to the formation of these AGEs. And more invisibly, they cause your heart to lose elasticity. We now even know they're involved in pretty much everything from cancer risk to risk of Alzheimer's disease. So, and again, the problem with the modern food environment, too much sugar, too many processed foods, a lot of us are getting too many of these AGEs, more than our body can cope with over time. And saturated fat, again, there's a huge amount of misinformation about saturated fat. But when you look at aging science, the issue is if you're getting more saturated fat than fiber, for example, or healthy fats like omega-3s, it actually creates a lot of inflammation in your gut. And one of the key things we really see, which differentiates the superagers from the rest of us, is they manage to keep their immune system working for much longer. And the issue of just having too much saturated fat over time is, it is just aggravating your immune system, accelerating immune aging. And then that makes your immune system less capable of fighting off pathogens, spotting cancers, things like that. So, yeah.
so sugar really is the devil then.
Sugar is the devil, and I think sometimes what people sometimes maybe misunderstand with some of this, it's not about just giving up chocolate for the rest of your life. It's just about finding a slightly better balance. Same with saturated fat. I've sort of written as a health journalist, the sort of should you eat butter or margarine piece numerous times. People love that argument, but ultimately that one doesn't really matter, because how much butter are you really going to eat? No one's eating a whole pack of butter. It's more about just about getting sort of the balance right. Most of us are just through ultra processed foods and ready meals and pizzas and things like that, getting a massive dollop of saturated fat and then relatively little of the healthy fats. And it's just all about trying to not eliminate foods, but just kind of shift the balance a bit.
That makes a lot of sense. That's very reassuring to know as well, that we haven't got to give up all of our vices, because I am a fully blown chocoholic. If there's a box of chocolates in front of me, no matter how big, I will be annihilating the lot of it. I'll still be shoving the chocolates in my face as I feel sick. I think I've got one of those genes that you mentioned in the book, where if I like something, I just cannot stop. And so I switched to dark chocolate so that I could have my cake and eat it, so to speak, because apparently that's really healthy and it's got loads of polyphenols in it, and it's it's considered a superfood. But then other people say, no, it's really high in saturated fat. You shouldn't have too much of that. Oh my God. And it's, oh my God, what do you do? How do you win? So this is really reassuring to know that, we can still enjoy some of the fruits of life, but, moderation.
Exactly, exactly. I think this is the problem now. There's so much health anxiety because, everything is in such black and white terms. And the reality is it's just so much more nuance. Even with ultra-processed foods, I say that, the average British person is getting 60% of their calories from ultra-processed foods, which is too much. But it's not about getting that down to zero. It's just about shifting that balance a little bit. If you can get that to 60% whole foods, 40% ultra-processed foods, then you're doing a lot better. If you can push it to 70-30, you're doing even better. So I think that's the easier thing to kind of keep in mind because, we've built our world in this way. We can't, you can't fight it too much and your body can cope with a lot more than you realize. It's just about giving it a bit more assistance.
That yeah, I was going to say because it is very difficult, especially for myself as a traveling musician. It's really difficult to eat the way that I would at home when you're on the road. It's just impossible. Everything is garbage in petrol stations and
Yeah, oh,
backstage,
completely.
and,
So,
and
so
you
I
travel a lot as
totally.
well.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it was quite funny when I was doing my first longevity diet for the book, which is basically the aim of it was to sort of completely revamp my diet for 2 months, actually try and eat 2,100 calories a day and just cut out ultra processed foods entirely and just replace them with like more nutrient dense whole foods. And I did two conferences in that time, and it was really, really difficult. And ironically, one of the difficult times was covering the World Cancer Congress, where, I was listening to all these talks all about, the dangers of sugar and all of these things, and you come out of the main seminar, and all the snacks are sugar, Coke, all of that. So when you're traveling and going to these things, it is really hard to eat healthy. But
The irony. Well, it's good to hear that we like we can have the occasional lapse because it's just the nature of most people's work life balance these days without trashing the main mission here. So that's good to hear. Just a quick one on processed foods before we move on. What about things like Huel? These are massive now and they're convenient, and we all snack on these things when we're out on the road, thinking that we're eating a healthier version because it's full of minerals and vitamins and stuff like that. But it's not real food. It's a meal in a bottle, and that's technically still ultra processed food, right?
exactly, exactly. I feel sometimes like so these things kind of help like so a little bit in terms of like maybe getting in a few more micronutrients, but the most important thing really is the whole foods, just because when you're eating like an artificial kind of shake, you're getting certain nutrients, but your body doesn't absorb them in the same way as when eating a broccoli or when eating a potato. And also, when you're eating a vegetable, you're getting such a variety of things. You're getting fiber, you're getting vitamins, you're getting minerals, you're getting all of these things in one package. And I think that's why ultra processed foods can never quite really replace that. And also, I think the other issue is a lot of the steps within food processing, they might be adding certain micronutrients in, but the processing is also destroying other nutrients. We know that the heating, we know that some of the most common preservatives are basically, inactivating kind of key vitamins and minerals we know.
Right.
And also, there's some really interesting stuff about some of the kind of flavorings, some of the dyes, some of these kind of artificial chemicals, because the body doesn't recognize them, are actually aggravating the immune system over time. So, you know, I think that's ultimately why nothing can really replace the whole foods.
Right. Well, we need to come on to that bad boy then, because that sounds like the info that we all need. A little sort of a word of reassurance before we delve into that for the people who haven't read the book yet and might be thinking like I would have before I'd read it that I'm too far gone. I'm middle aged now. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, raised on Kellogg cereals with white sugar on top and Coca-Cola and McDonald's and smoking, and we all thought all that stuff was fine. Are we too far gone? How much is reversible? Do we stand a fighting chance? Is it worth us bothering to do the sort of things that we're going to come and talk about next?
It's a very good point. I mean, and I think that's the message I really wanted to try and address in the book because it's never too late with so many different things. I mean, actually, smoking is a really, really interesting one because I think everyone, who's smoked for 40 years and they get to 60, they're like, why quit now? My risk of lung cancer is probably already so high. But actually, in fact, it's probably all the more important to quit at 60 than it is when you're younger because with things like we know smoking causes heart attacks.
Right.
If you quit as a 6 year old, as a lifelong smoker, your risk of a short term heart attack is really, really, really high. But if you quit, that drops massively within just 2 weeks. So that's just one example of like how just taking a small step to protect your body, even switching from smoking to vaping, all just overnight make a big difference simply just because you're bombarding your body with less toxins.
Wow, that's
And
fascinating.
and the same with food. And the interesting thing with food, which a lot of people just don't realize, is that your body's needs for nutrients actually go up with age. Like really, at 90, we should be eating way healthier than we are at 30.
Right.
Because, and it's quite interesting. There was a fascinating study I came across while reporting the book. It came out about 6 years ago, and it sort of modeled our body's requirements of different vitamins and minerals across the life course. And you could just really see, how much vitamin C you need at 20, how much you need at 50, how much you need at 70, and it just kind of keeps going up. And the reason is the body's just kind of getting less efficient as we age. Like everything is just kind of slowing down, getting a bit more sluggish. And you just need like this assistance from your body to kind of help it, kick it back into gear, give it some extra fuel to kind of fight off and do all the things that it needs to do. So it's very interesting. And we actually see, people who like in their 20s and 30s are eating, doing all the bad things. But the ones who change at 40 and then stick to it for the next 30 years, they're biologically much, much younger when they get to the 70s.
Right.
So
So
there's
don't
a
give up
huge
hope.
amount
Yeah.
we can do. Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
right. We can reverse this and turn the turn the tide around from all those happy meals and chocolate cookies and things like that that we munched on. My health was terrible until I was about 35, and then I got really into this stuff and lost a load of weight and was exercising loads and stuff like that. So it always stuck in the back of my mind. Have I done? Is the damage done?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
So
me too. Me too. I mean, ironically, I was a neuroscientist doing a PhD, and probably at the same time as I was doing that, my lifestyle and diet could not have been any
right.
worse. Which, is probably why I did like sort of all these biological aging tests at 35 and found, oh yeah, oh no, I'm 2 years biologically older. But, then there is the good news that there's so much you can do in a very short space of time, which can make a big difference.
The body's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Well, I took a load of notes throughout the book for my own personal use as well. So, as we're coming towards the sort of halfway mark for the conversation, we've established what we're all doing wrong, but there is hope. We can turn the tide around. One of the main things that you talk about, if I'm going to try and summarize very simplistically, one of the main things that you said that suggest people should do is a low calorie, nutrient dense diet. Is that accurate? And also, what does that look like for most people on a daily basis?
Definitely. I mean, I feel like so the low calorie nutrients dense diet is a good kind of like, midlife health kick. And I think the interesting thing about it is you can just, even in a month, 2 months, you can do that as like, a New Year reset or a summer reset. And you can just see these differences, in such a short space of time. I mean, I did it. And by the end, I could not only see the benefits in the tests, like my immune system, I think the age of my immune system had gone down by like 3 years, like so within this 2 month period.
Wow.
But I also just felt sharper,
Right.
I was writing the book at the time, and I rattled off 6 chapters in the time it had taken me to, kind of write one or two kind of before. So I was performing, I think, at a better level as well. So it's very interesting just how quickly you can make a change. Obviously it's tricky to stick to like a low calorie, nutrient dense diet, kind of like for months, years, just simply because of the way the food environment is. So that basically just involves kind of trying to, there's these calculators online, and I kind of list a few of them in the book, which you can use to estimate your own resting metabolic rate, like the number of calories you really need to, and then just try and stick to that for as long as you can. And, but again, I don't want to stress people out too much because, I eliminated ultra processed foods for 2 months. Doing that long term is tricky. But I feel if you just manage to kind of get that reset and then just maybe do that just for 2 months of a year, and keep doing that over time, that will probably make a long-term difference to your health. Um, and I think it's just in terms of just on a day-to-day basis, it's just some of the principles of that. which make a little bit of a difference. We should all be getting, for example, more vitamin K. It's one of the micronutrients no one really talks about, and you get that in things like egg yolks, you get that in dairy, you get it in soybeans, you get it in leafy greens, like things like spinach and kale are really, the forgotten superfoods. And the reason why vitamin K is really, really important is because it stops calcification of the arteries. Vitamin K is really, really important in transporting calcium, to where you actually need it, which is in your bones. And you can actually see, when people get to their early 50s, the amount of calcification they actually have in their arteries, really does correlate to their life expectancy. So, the sooner you can be trying to get more vitamin K into your diet, that can make a really, really big difference to, how long you're actually going to live.
That is incredible, man. And with personal feedback like from your own story as well, that's just insane. And as you said, there are no hard and fast rules with these things. Everybody's biology is different. Everybody's situation is different. But if we're talking general principles, a low-calorie, nutrient-dense diet is clearly one that we should be trying to work into our lives. But also another one, which is very prominent throughout the book, is that we should all be getting a lot more fiber.
Yeah. 100%, 100%. Fiber is kind of like the macronutrient, which really sort of gets forgotten. Like everyone is massively focused on protein at the moment. We're sort of living in this protein obsession, but there's a nuance of protein which always gets kind of left out. And I think, again, this comes down to like marketing, because protein is an industry worth about $90 billion worldwide. It's colossal. Like there's huge amounts of influencers, brands, a lot of people who are making serious money on this and like promoting more and more protein. But no one really talks about is more protein is great if you're working out. If you're one of those people who is actually doing 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week and doing strength training 2 to 3 times a week, then great, eat more protein. Your body will be able to use that to build more muscle. But your average 50-year-old is probably not doing that. They're probably just eating the more protein. And again, from an aging perspective, the problem with that is protein really promotes growth. And if your body's got nothing to actually use that protein to grow, you're just going to be growing all kinds of other things which you don't want to be growing. You're going to be growing more. You're going to be creating more inflammation. You're going to be creating more fat. You're also, if you've got damaged cells and you've got growth pathways in your body being activated, it's more likely that one of them might, spiral out of control and eventually develop into a tumor, which is why we see that, people who eat more protein but aren't doing the exercise, their risk in like the next kind of 5 to 10 years of all kinds of different chronic diseases is actually a lot higher. And you even see it in animal studies as well. It's quite interesting. They take rodents, they give them a low protein diet and a high protein diet, and the ones on the low protein diet actually live 30% longer. So there's a real like sort of lot of misinformation about protein, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy, and that's what I love about this book, and that's why I would urge everybody. Because I mean, you've given quite a lot of great advice and wisdom from the book already, just in this half an hour chat we've had so far. But people need to understand that this book is a broad book, and you go into all the science behind it and your personal journey as well, and all the tests that you personally did and what that uncovered about yourself, which was one of the most fascinating parts of the book for myself. But if people really want to expand on this stuff and understand why the things that you're saying are the truth behind it and the evidence behind it, they need to do a deep dive into the book. And it's also a great reference point, because I've been like leafing back through it and everything like that, because you've got the breakdowns of all the minerals and what they do and where we can get them from. It's a fascinating reference book. So I would urge everybody to rush out and get the H code, because it's kind of the Bible, I think, of where we're at with modern food science and understanding and health. So I just want to sort of wedge that in at this point in the conversation to remind people that there is a book out and they need to get their hands on it, because it's really life-changing stuff that's going to make all of our lives happier and healthier. So coming back to the chat, just drop a little advert in there for you.
Appreciate it.
So we don't want to give all this stuff away for free, right? We want people to go out and buy the book because they need to.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I was fascinated about, because I already do this because I'm a guitar player and I worry about my arthritis and things like that happening at a later age, is I do take a lot of omega-3s, and I didn't realize, I only take it for that personal issue. I didn't realize how important omega-3 is to a whole range of bodily functions. Could we talk about that for a second?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. There's just going to be if someone just picks one thing from that entire book to do, it probably is a good argument that that should just be having more omega threes. Like that alone is probably going to make a significant difference, both in the short term and the long term, to how well you're aging. I mean, I'm going to give you an example of that. So I'm now 37. I love playing tennis, and I think there's a certain like time points in our life where you just really start to notice like, oh, okay, I am actually aging. And I sort of had just one of those little awakenings when I was 35. And just for the very first time, I started waking up just feeling a little bit stiff in the mornings, and I just remember when I was 18, I could play three sets of tennis and not feel it at all the next day. And now, like, so playing tennis for a few hours, the next day I'd wake up in the morning and just feel so, so, so stiff. And so I started taking more omega 3s. And then suddenly the morning stiffness started to go away. It was really, really interesting. And omega 3s are at their heart really anti-inflammatory nutrients. And we know that they actually play like a really, really big role in muscle and joint health. So now one of the really fascinating learnings from sports science is actually the omega-3 index, which sort of measures the amount of omega-3s you're getting compared to like different types of other healthy fats. And so now in the Premier League, in the Six Nations, it's quite routine for the sports scientists working for different national teams or the clubs to be constantly measuring like how much omega-3 the players are getting, and the amount present in their blood, because over the course of the season they see that makes a big difference in terms of how resilient the players are to injuries and how better they recover, and that correlates to all of us. Like if we get more omega-3s, we're also kind of more resilient to getting injured. We also maintain muscle a lot better, which is one of the big changes which happens to so many of us across middle age. Our bodies kind of go through this sort of invisible change in body composition where we go from having quite a lot of lean muscle to becoming progressively just more and more fat, which is really, really bad for many aspects of the aging process. But actually getting more omega-3s in your diet can really help you avoid that and maintain muscle, and can make such a huge difference to a lot of us over time.
And it's such an easy thing to get. I take a supplement which gives me a gram of omega-3 every day. It's so easy to do. So yeah, that's really powerful that you said that if there's one thing people can take away from the book, that it's that. That's such a simple fix that we can all put into practice as well. Yeah, 100%. So we need to talk about one of the main organs involved in this as well, quickly if we can. We had the great Tim Spector on the podcast previously, doing a whole episode specifically on the gut. I'd love to get your thoughts on the functionality of the gut and the role it plays in this, just briefly. And also, is there any updated science on this since we had Mr. Spector on the podcast, which may change the nature of the conversation about the gut's role in this stuff?
Definitely. I mean, I think the gut is so, so, so fascinating because I think everyone kind of thinks about the gut. They sort of think about fiber, all that kind of stuff. But the gut is connected to so many different organ systems. There's all these kind of spidery networks which kind of link out between the gut and the brain, the gut and the liver, even the gut and the muscles. So actually keeping lots of your gut healthy plays such a big role in keeping all kinds of different organ systems healthy. And obviously Tim has played like such a big role in like enhancing a lot of that science. And around the world, there's been some really fascinating studies. So, for example, China has a blue zone. China has this one particular hotspot. It's in a very remote kind of region where they have quite a high proportion of centenarians, and they've done some studies on them. And, one idea seems to be that they simply manage to keep their guts healthier for longer. And why that's really, really key, and if you're going to just highlight one reason, is there's this big link between the gut and the immune system. And everyone kind of forgets a little bit about the immune system when it comes to longevity, but it's absolutely key because, when we get to sort of our 70s and 80s, our risk of just, being hospitalized with infections massively goes up, and it's your immune system having a more active immune system which can fight off all these bacteria and viruses and things like that. Your immune system plays such a big role in terms of screening for cancers. It also plays a massive role in just removing toxins from your brain. So people who have a better immune system are going to be, much less vulnerable to getting dementia. The immune system is really also even important in protecting the heart. So the immune system, all those kind of major killers areas which become more and more susceptible to, if your immune system is working, then it can delay a lot of that for much, much longer. And that comes down to the gut. And part of it is because two-thirds of your immune cells basically kind of lie in your gut. So what you're eating has this very just direct impact on the health of the immune system.
I'm guessing things then like acid reflux, bloating, cramps, or anything like that is an indicator that something in the gut is not happy.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, and it's interesting. I think a lot of this can be like mitigated again in like sort of relatively short space of time by just simply say like increasing the amount of fiber in your diet. And to give you an example of, we talked earlier about how it's never too late. There was a fascinating study, I think last year or the year before, which came out. I mean, it took people in the early stages of cognitive decline. So these people kind of had, I think they might have even had, early Alzheimer's. And they just simply increased the amount of fiber in their diets. And over the course of 5 months, their performance on all kinds of different cognitive scores just like improved. And again, that's because you're stimulating the immune system, which in turn stimulates the brain. So you can get all of these very short-term benefits. Like keeping the gut healthy also mitigates against frailty. One of the
Right.
reasons why we become both physically frail and cognitively frail is related to the immune system, and we're just much less resilient to trauma. But if you again just increasing fiber, increasing fermented foods, all of these things which help the gut produce lots of useful chemicals which can be then used for all of these different organ systems, that can help massively delay and even reverse aspects of frailty.
It's so fascinating, isn't it? I mean, that's super important stuff, and it can all be enacted so simply with just a little bit of understanding about what we're eating and when we're eating it and how we're eating it, and just eating actual food. I think it comes down to for the most part, and it's so simple and so powerful that can enhance all of our lives. So yeah, like I've said before, it's such a wonderful way that you've condensed all of this stuff into one really accessible book for us all to refer back to. So again, thank you for that. You also, throughout the book, as I mentioned, undergo a variety of very fascinating and obscure, bizarre tests, which I think I would be hesitant to do myself because I wouldn't want to know the results. I'd love you to just explain to listeners just a few of the more interesting ones that you undertook, because there's tons throughout the book that you did, which are mind blowing. And also, if you could recommend just one of them as the most important one for people to spend their money on, which one would it be?
Yeah, no, I think this is the great thing now because, 10 years ago, we didn't really have like much in terms of the way of actually measuring aging. If you think about like sort of the standard kind of NHS health checkup, you're sort of measuring like so looking at your BMI, your blood pressure, but these things don't really tell us that much about some of the key organs, which are really, really important in longevity. Keeping your kidneys healthy, for example, is hugely, hugely important because they are the organs which help regulate toxins, like so from the blood, like so same with like so your liver, like so plays like so a huge role into your ability to still break down like so alcohol, metabolize caffeine. There's all of these important like so functions for you, and none of that is sort of captured by the typical things which we pick up in healthcare. To kind of give an example of one particularly interesting test I did, I got my DNA sequence because we now know, like, so there's big variations between one person and another in terms of how something like coffee, for example, like affects us. Like coffee is a really, really fascinating drink because there's been a lot of research which has actually shown that coffee really is something of a superfood. People who drink more coffee have better brain health. More coffee actually is great for the liver. But there's now some liver doctors, particularly in the States, who they have someone with fatty liver disease. One of the first things they prescribe is start drinking more coffee because coffee has all these beneficial properties, not just the caffeine, all these beneficial plant chemicals within it, which can both act like nourish the gut and through the gut, like sort of activate a lot of these different organ systems. So, but coffee, whether you should be drinking caffeinated or decaffeinated, really depends on like a variant you carry of a particular gene. And this seems to sort of split like the population, like roughly like so 50-50. And for some people, they're like the fast metabolizers. These people can happily drink 5 cups of coffee a day and have no ill effects. Basically, we just have these enzymes which break down caffeine just so much more quickly. And so, they can break down the caffeine, not get any ill effects from it, and benefit from everything else within coffee. But then for the slow metabolizers, that caffeine is just lingering around for so much longer in the body. And it's why for some people they get really anxious, really jittery from drinking coffee. Some people call it panic juice, like for that reason. And for them, they probably should be either just sticking to 1 or 2 cups of coffee and then going to decaf, or just purely just drinking decaf. And this was a really, really interesting one for me to do because I had noticed in the past that when I drank some particularly strong coffee, I would actually my eyelashes would actually start twitching. So
Yeah,
I
I'm
kind
saying,
of
yeah.
I subconsciously knew this, but kind of persisted in drinking coffee anyway. As many of us do.
Yeah.
I'm a massive coffee fan. But then I did this test and it said, you are a slow metabolizer. If you are consistently drinking 3 cups of coffee a day, okay, that, might have some benefits for your brain health, but it's also going to be raising your blood pressure and stressing your heart. So it's bad for you for that reason. So for now, and so instead, I now just drink 1 cup of coffee a day and then, we'll maybe drink 2 or 3 cups of decaf. So it's that sort of information which can allow us to make these more tailored decisions. I also
Yeah.
found out that I am, some of my weaknesses in terms of foods. I'm a super taster of fats. So I love chocolate digestives. I find it really, really hard to kind of eat just 1 or 2. I will just
Same,
devour an entire
same.
pack. And
Yeah.
it's because my body is primed to like sort of sense that fat content within them. And then just like it tells my brain to just crave more and more. So, you learn these things. It's like, okay, I know now that like so I need to stay away from those foods because, I'm gonna find it harder to control myself. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, this stuff is fascinating, man. I mean, these tests, unfortunately, as esoteric and as interesting as they are quite spendy, aren't they? So, would there be one you could recommend as a starting point for people that if they were going to get one done and put their money down, which one would it be?
I think a good one, there's one called PhenoAge, which you can now get like privately through like a few providers, I think like Randox Health and like various others like offer it. That's really, really interesting because it basically just kind of like provides an overview of the amount of stress which your organs are under.
Okay.
So it measures these different biomarkers in the blood, like there's one called albumin, which like reflects like of your liver health. There's another one which basically reflects your kidney health, and you get like just quite a good like so kind of like top line like some overview of how each of these organ systems in your body are doing. How much it measures one protein which sort of reflects inflammation. So I think that's quite a good one to start off with. And also the good thing about PhenoAge is it's quite responsive. So if you make changes, it's reflected in that quite quickly, which is quite good positive feedback because you can say do it once. It's relatively cheap as well compared to some of the others. Like some of these tests can cost 300, £400.
Right.
PhenoAge, I think, costs about £70 to
Oh,
do.
that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So you can
Yeah,
do it like
amazing.
sort of a couple of months apart, really like to get some feedback on like how, what your changes are actually doing and if there's something you still need to improve on.
Yeah, that's great to know, and thank you for sharing that. I will be getting my order in ASAP. Now, one of the questions that I know are going to be on a lot of people's minds right now after listening to everything you've said so far is, what about Keith Richards?
Yeah.
What about Anthony Bourdain? My nan is 99 and she's drunk neat whiskey every day for the past 60 years of her life, but she's still going strong. What do you say to the people that would be like, those guys have spent all their life smoking and drinking and rocking and rolling and doing what the hell they like and they're fine. So why should I bother with all this healthy eating stuff?
It's very true. It's very true. Keith Richards is probably going to live to 100, isn't he? He's sort of like bucked like sort of, every expectation of him.
Yes.
I sort of hope he does just to to defy us all.
Yes.
I think that just does show, there is a significant role which genetics kind of plays like in all of this. I think sort of the thinking now, there was like a fascinating paper which came out in Science, which is one of the most prestigious journals at the start of the year, which did kind of suggest that probably like sort of the likelihood of living to 100 is 50-50 in terms of genetics and like lifestyle. So genes can play like sort of a really, really big role. And there are some people who just simply seem to have these genetic variants, which mean that they're body's repair systems are just working, 3 or 4 times more efficiently than the rest of us. So it could be that simply Keith Richards has, one of these genes, which means, yes, he's smoking, yes, he's taking, he's taken all of these substances
Everything.
across his life. But his genes are just working overtime to sort of clear away like sort of a lot of that damage. And I think the interesting thing in longevity science in the next kind of 10 years is we're going to start honing in more and more on exactly what some of those genes are. We already know a few of them, which is really, really interesting. And, I think there probably will be tests, you'll be able to get your DNA sequenced in 10 years time, and they'll be able to tell you, yes, you probably can, keep drinking alcohol for longer because, you do have like so some of these genes which are mitigating like a lot of that.
Right.
But where I think like so diet is still really, really important is because diet allows you to max out what you have. For example, like, so you might be someone who's got great genes. You might have the potential to live to 120, but perhaps because of the lifestyle aspect, you might only live to 90. Whereas on the other hand, you might have really, really bad genes. But, by doing the right things with your lifestyle, you will kind of live like 20 years longer than, otherwise would have done. So I think it's like your genes just kind of like set this sort of framework for lifespan, a little bit like so how they do for height, but then what you're doing, what you're eating allows you to max out your sort of your capability.
Can you imagine if Keith Richards read your book? Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
He'd still be roaming the earth.
He'd be Methuselah.
200 years from now. Yeah. Well, I got to let you go soon because I could pick your brains all day long, and I know that's not fair for me to do. So I just want to end with one question. When everybody takes on board everything you've said, and hopefully they will, is it still possible for us to live and enjoy the fruits of life, pizza, cake, whiskey, beers, all that good stuff, and still work within the framework that you're proposing within this book?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm all about balance basically within the book. So, right at the end of the book, I encourage people to maybe just pick 3 things, like out of all of the suggestions, 3 things they think they can kind of commit to. So it could be that you just continue on what you're doing, but you just simply have more omega-3s. You maybe just change the timing of your meals. You maybe just start getting more leafy greens. There's a whole chapter in there on how you can change your cooking, which can help you live longer. Just some of these things. So, you can still kind of keep your treats, but just incorporate a couple of these lots of little tips which can help maybe lots of mitigate some of that. It could be that if you're having lots of kind of like a big pizza but several times a week, but you're eating lots of kind of most of your calories across breakfast and lunch for most of the week, then if you have those pizzas at the weekend, then it doesn't do your body's overall still going to be repairing better.
Amen to that. Thank God. That's great to hear. Oh, well, David, we've got to let you go, unfortunately. Thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous today with sharing some of the wisdom from within the book. Very empowering stuff, and we all totally appreciate what you've done in writing the book and in sharing all of this amazing research with us in such an accessible way. So thank you for that. The Age Code is out now, available everywhere and packed with so much more of this good stuff. You need to get your hands on it. Buy a copy for your friends and your relatives as well. Go out and get it right away. You will not regret it. And set yourself up for a happier, healthier, and longer, lovelier life. I'll put a link to buy the book directly in the show notes as well to make it easier for you to go and click on it. You can also go and keep up with what David is up to on Instagram at Dr. David Cox Health for updates. David, this has been a real gift. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. We appreciate you. Thanks for giving us your time and stopping by today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me too. Yeah. Thank you so much, David. And best wishes with everything. Best wishes with your mission as well to make us all healthier. We appreciate you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Cheers. Thank you, man. Bye.
Dr. David Cox, ladies and gentlemen, put it together for him.
What an absolute gent. That was a super generous giving of one's time and expertise there. I learned an absolute ton, and I hope you did as well. And please, please, please do go out and get a copy of The Age Code. I wouldn't lie to you, man. If you found that conversation informative, inspiring, and interesting, then trust me, the book has got about 100 times more goodness in it. It's a real standout piece of work on this particular subject, and I hope David is very proud of it. And if you want to cut through all the noise and just have one book to refer back to on your bookshelf that covers everything you need to know about food and food science and health and well-being and your body and how best to keep your machine operating at optimal performance, then the Age Code is the one you want to get on your shelf. Unless you're Keith Richards, in which case, carry on as you are, sir. Quick reminder on David's Instagram as well. He is at Dr. David Cox Health. Check him out there for, new releases and new stuff that he's got coming up. A link to get the book will be directly in the show notes. So if you would just want to click on it, then you can just go and click on it there. And whilst you're there, you can click the star button for this episode of the podcast. You can click share if you want. Go crazy. Knock yourself out. Please, please, please do that. I'm being dead serious. That stuff is the life and death of these podcasts. So if you can give me a rating, I would love you forever and I'll keep these things coming. Now, go and eat more fiber. Lay off the processed food. Chuck the sugary snacks in the bin. And go out for a walk, goddammit. And I will see you on the next episode with another awesome guest. God, I'm good to you.